1983 saw the release of Conquest by Lucio Fulci, who is most notably known for his work in the horror genre, but he dipped his toe in the sword and sorcery genre that was becoming popular at the time thanks to movies like Conan and Beastmaster. And this one stars Jorge Rivero, who was a big star in Mexico, in his native Mexico. And you've also got Sabrina Siani in this one, who is been in a whole bunch of kind of sword and sorcery movies, along with many kind of like cannibal type movies and stuff like that. It's a fairly famous Italian actress at the time. So this was a kind of a melding of kind of the sword and sorcery genre with the kind of the gore and horror elements that obviously Fulci had developed in his time in the horror genre. So what we're end up with is somewhat a surreal, fairly violent kind of fantasy movie at the end of the day. So the story here, we have a kind of like a Greek warrior. It's never said that it's Greek, but it appears to be like some type of a Greek warrior who is like an archer. He's a younger guy, and he's basically kind of sent on a mission to defeat this evil sorceress played by Sabrina Siani, who always is the whole movie. She's completely topless and is wearing like a gold mask. You never actually see her face, but it is her. Along the way, he meets a kind of like barbarian warrior played by Jorge Rivero, and he's this kind of like barbarian with nunchucks, and he has this kind of thing where he is very kind of conscious about the lives of animals, and he lives to kind of serve animals. So you've got made of this kind of these nunchucks, and you've got Ilias, who is he comes from a slightly more evolved kind of like area with this kind of magical bow that kind of fires out like light sort of arrows, a bit like the if you've ever seen the cartoon show Dungeons and Dragons, like Hank's bow, a little bit like that. Anyway, and the pair of them kind of team up and try to defeat ultimately Sabrina Siani's sorceress, along with her kind of millions of dog people. She's got like these kind of weird seaweed people, are kind of like Lord of the Underworld kind of like henchmen and things like this. And it's just the kind of the misadventures along the way, and ultimately the kind of the final confrontation. So what do we think of Conquest? So like I've said, this is certainly an adult orientated, and there's a lot of nudity. Sian is literally topless the whole time she's on screen, and she's on screen a fair amount. So there's plenty of nudity here. There's also some extreme violence. If you've seen the movie Terrifier recently, which has got a scene where Art the Clown literally saws a woman from spread eagle down towards the head, if you know what I mean. There's a very similar scene in this movie where these kind of dog creatures, like dogmen, tear this woman in half from a leg each, pulling outwards, if you see what I mean. So there's pretty gruesome. There's lots of kind of like bloody gore effects. I mean, yeah, it's 1983. Obviously, don't be expecting anything too realistic. If you've seen kind of like zombie flesh eaters, you kind of know what you're getting into. And there's actually a zombie scene in this movie as well. So it's gory. It's very violent. But it's just really bizarre. The weird thing about this movie is it doesn't make a lot of sense. Don't be expecting anything too sensible here. It just, these people are just plonked in this kind of setup without any real kind of like backstory. They're just on this mission pretty much straight away. And the decision was made to film this with a very soft focus and use a lot of smoke machine and a lot of kind of dry ice. So the end result is actually quite hard to see what's going on, because the whole movie is got a soft focus, and for most scenes have this kind of like a lot of dry ice, and the idea was to give it an ethereal feel to it, which is all well and good, but your problem is you can't really see what's going on a lot of the time. So you lose a lot of the detail in it, unfortunately. I've got to say, I found the characters quite interesting in this film. So Jorge Rivero's kind of barbarian character, Mace, like I've said, he's this guy who doesn't want to know anything. He doesn't want to have anything to do with other humans, really. Although he does make the kind of, there is a line in it where he just goes, "Yeah, I just basically come and shag her whenever I come and feel like it." But yeah, he's kind of very much, you know, he doesn't want to have any harm to animals. And there's a bizarre scene where he rescues like an eagle, and there's like, it kind of flies up. They have a very unconvincing fake eagle flying around, which is quite funny. And he's rescued by dolphins as well at one point. It's kind of another bizarre scene. And then Ilias, who is this kind of young, sort of wet behind the ears kind of warrior, seems a bit more idealistic. You know, pretty much is constantly getting in trouble, and makes us sort of come and rescue him. So the pair of them, they're quite fun characters. And the other interesting thing with this one is Sabrina Sione's character, Orkron, who is this sorceress, always seems to be on the back foot. It's not like she's kind of like, you know, I'm going to easily defeat all these guys. She's constantly like, they're coming for me. Do something, someone. She's almost like in a state of panic the whole movie, because she thinks these guys, because she has this weird vision where one of them kind of tries to, it basically kills her. And so she's always like, she's constantly kind of like on the back foot, so to speak. So she's not like a particularly confident villain. And all she's doing is kind of getting other people to go and, you know, do her bidding for her. And I'm going to say the final conflict with her is a little bit anticlimactic, if I'm completely honest. I tell you what this film reminded me of. And I saw this film ages ago, and they've actually released the 30th anniversary on the Blu-ray media book. I had this on VHS, and watching it now for this review, it reminds me of the movie Fire and Ice, the animated film, in the way that you have this kind of the two heroes in that one. So you have a kind of an idealistic young hero who then sort of ropes in like an older, more experienced, complete badass. So in that one, in this one, you've got Mace. In Fire and Ice, you had Dark Wolf, and ultimately they kind of take over the kind of the thrust of the plot as the film kind of concludes. It's very similar to that in a way. So this movie it's going to be not something for everyone. If you are a fan of Fulci's work, then you're going to want to check it out. But the plot is pretty nonsensical, and it's just, there's some very bizarre scenes in this. It's done with just kind of, people just do things without any kind of like reason for doing them. You know, so it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's kind of a little bit basic in times, if that makes sense. And you just have to accept things for what they are. Kind of it's a cheesy, you know, fantasy movie. We're not going to take it too seriously, but it is a lot of fun, and it has some quite fun characters, and you know, it's kind of interesting to see this with quite extreme gore at sort of times, albeit low budget, you know, old-fashioned style gore. But there's like there's a scene, for example, where Ilias gets shot with this kind of like these poisoned like reed. It's like this weird thing where they have these cartoon like reeds that sort of come out, and one gets him, and he gets all these pustules, and there's like these lingering shots of all these just pustules just kind of like bursting and kind of like leaking out all over the place. So it's a little disgusting at times. So it's a little bit of an oddity, this one. By no means is it a good story. There's very little narrative here. So I don't think it can compare as much as some of these other examples, which have a little bit more to them in regards to sort of story. But there's just kind of like some fun elements here that make it as more of a curiosity. And like I've said, it's just having this kind of very extreme violence and gore in it. It just makes it sort of stand out to a certain degree. Obviously, this isn't the only film that sort of came out from, you know, the Italian kind of like method of doing sword and sorcery. Obviously, we had Thor the Conqueror, we had the Ator series, to name just a couple. But yeah, this one's a bit of fun. I'll give this one a 5 out of 10. I actually found it surprisingly watchable, despite the fact this has got a lot wrong with it. So it's kind of like a guilty pleasure, so bad it's good type thing. So if you know what you're getting into, then I think you can enjoy it. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.